we were talking about chapter 1, Bronze Age people. Bronze Age, we said roughly 3,000, some people say 3,500 BC to 1,200 BC. And then afterwards comes the Iron Age. But there was something that we called the Catastrophe of 1200 BC. What was that catastrophe about? Well, it has to do with the nature and the structure of society during the Bronze Age and afterwards during the Iron Age. Bronze Age society was a divided society. A society divided between wealthy aristocracy, kings, in most cases, who lived in their palaces with their servants, officers, who basically lived off the work by the lower classes. So if you are a famous Joe Peasant, Mr. Joe Peasant living in Egypt, or Mesopotamia, or Greece for that matter. We're getting to Greece in chapter 3, but you would live in a palace. In Greece it would be on top of the hill. Egypt there are no hills, there are no big hills at least. So, palace, and peasants would bring you things, what we call taxes. Part of the crops, share of the crops, belonged to the overlord, to the ruler. And that's how these societies developed. So it was a society of those who rule and those who are ruled. And that society ended in 1200 BC or thereabout. And I say thereabout because in various places it's ended, maybe 10 years earlier, 10 years before. 50 years up and down, no big deal for us. And we have good evidence of that catastrophe. Sources in Egypt write about it. Egyptian pharaohs write about sea people. Who are these sea people? I don't know. They don't say much. They come from the sea. But they are nasty. In what sense nasty? Well, they destroyed the society that existed before. And a lot of people speculate that they managed to destroy the society that existed during the Bronze Age because in general, the majority of people were not happy with that society. It was a society of superiors and subordinates. It was very stratified society. Stratified means layers. So the top layer, king and his buddies and families, and the rest of us. Kind of like today. Supposedly, we moved away from there. But anyways, Western civilization is the story of how we moved from this very divided society of the Bronze Age into something that is more equitable, better to live in. And we moved through the institution of city-state. So there were a lot of city-states that emerged during the Iron Age. So there was a catastrophe, this old society was destroyed, and the new society came out of the ashes. And when you do the archaeological digs, it's literally what it looks like. There is a layer, and Bronze Age society was a rich society. But a rich society, in the sense, when I talk to you about the richness of Egypt. Well, the richness of Egypt is the richness of the Pharaoh and the people who are with him. Not necessarily that every, Joe Egyptian was rich on personal level. These city-states appear in the Middle East. They appear in Israel. They appear in Lebanon. Here it is called Phoenicia. So there is, a group of Phoenician city-states. Tyre, Sidon, or Sidon. I've heard people pronounce it both ways. So apparently there is no correct way to do it. Jewish city-states. In other words, Jerusalem of Judah. I'll explain this Judah later on. And Samaria. Samaria, for example. These city-states can come in various political forms. So a city-state could be ruled by a king. It could be ruled by aristocracy. And aristocracy comes from the Greek words aristos, which mean the best, excellent, and kratos, which means the state. Kratos means the state. And we have democracy, or that comes later in Greece. So that's our chapter 3. Democracy, which demos means people, and kratos means state. So state of the people. At least this is the case of Greece. In Greece, for example, we don't talk about sea people, we talk about Dorians. Dorian invasion. So there were these Greeks who came from the north and conquered that area and destroyed the Bronze Age civilization and created their city-states. Most importantly, their city-states of Athens and Sparta. Athens and Sparta. Anyways, these Dorians gave us the bank down on the street, on Main Street, Elizabeth Broad Street. It has classical columns. These elongated columns, if you go out, and pass the bank, for example, it's right where you go towards the New Jersey Transit Station, has these elongated columns. So these columns are called Ionian columns, but those that look like this, these are called Dorian columns. So these are Dorian. I shouldn't have introduced the Ionians because they kind of confused the whole thing. But the idea, if you go around looking, or go around the city looking for these, you'll see both kinds. And the idea is that these Dorians had the reputation of being rough because they were invaders, they destroyed the Bronze Age Greece, and therefore, these Dorian columns are always on the ground floor or kind of basement, depending on the building. So, because they symbolize the strength, roughness of the Dorians. Who are these Dorians? Those are peoples who destroyed the Bronze Age civilization. Let's start from, I'm going to show you a picture. Here, that's a nice one. I don't know if it's big enough. Maybe. Yeah, big enough. Huh? You can see it. What was your name?
Sebastian.
Sebastian, okay. Sebastian is here. That means everybody is here. No, except Ivana. A little bit about how this society of the Bronze Age was destroyed, especially in the later part of the Bronze Age. The society was a very warrior-like society, and it was a society of these chariot warriors. So these are the chariots that I'm talking about. In the morning I tried to draw a chariot, and that was a disaster. It turned out to be a disaster. So I'm not going to do it again, so I pull out this nice picture. So these are light chariots. They're not very heavy. You see, you know, it's not like 200 pounds heavy chariot. And well, here we have 2 horses, right? Egyptians didn't quite understand what we call the perspective. That, you know, the further away things are, the smaller they do. So they just added 2 more legs to indicate that, you know, these are actually, you know, and 2 heads. And these are actually 2 horses. But they're of the same size. We would, you know, the horse behind would be a little smaller. But these charioteers were the armies of the late Bronze Age in particular. And that was a terrifying sight for the people of the Bronze Age. Because you have well-trained people who devoted all of their life to being warriors. They shoot these arrows, the horses are fast because the chariots are light, and it's just a horrible thing to encounter unless you figure out a way how to do it. And one of the theories how the Bronze Age civilization ended is that people figure out how to fool these chariot warriors. So they would run in, you know, formations, like 300 of them, towards the enemy. And people would just hide behind trenches, dig up the trenches, and put pikes with newly found iron spears at the top. So the horses will run all the way to the spikes and stop, because horses are not going to impale themselves, they will stop. And that's the moment when these warriors, sea people or Dorians, would come out of the trenches and beat the boss with a bow and arrow with a club on, you know, on his head. Is that clear? How it happened? It's one of the theories. Maybe it's not exactly that it happened everywhere like that, but, you know, there is evidence that, you know, something changed in the nature of warfare between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. In the Iron Age, they no longer fight this way. They fight as, you know, Greek and Roman soldiers with spears, shields, and swords. So it's more of an infantry fighting. That's one of the theories. There are a couple of others. There are people who think that there was some sort of volcanic eruption, caused problems, and maybe it was a combination of things. But in all, we know that this unequal society of the Bronze Age ended, and the new society of city-states emerged. And one of the things that city-states brought us was the money. The money. if you live in such a society as the Bronze Age society, where you give tribute to the king, you don't really need money. Because these palaces for kings were, for the most part, storage facilities, where they can store the goods, wheat, olive oil, and what else is this? There is a thing that is called the Mediterranean Triad: wheat, olive oil, and grapes. Grapes. Those are three main staples of the diet in the ancient world in general. And grapes are important because water is very dangerous in general. Water is polluted very easily. So we go to a lot of trouble to keep water clean. And they put all sorts of stuff in the water, chlorine and this and that, and that's why I always use the Brita filter. I don't get the money from Brita, but Brita filters, I don't know, makes me safer. But in ancient world, they didn't have those, so therefore, you mixed water and wine, and that kills the bacteria. Alcohol kills the bacteria, right? That's what we do here. It's alcohol and kills supposedly the bacteria and it doesn't really kill viruses, but that's another story. That's COVID, right? But it makes us feel better. Oh, anyways. So, triad: wheat, olive oil, and grapes. And therefore, these people start a different society where you actually, Greeks were the first one to do it, but they were not the only one actually. Phoenicians, ancient Phoenicians were really good at trade. Greek vases. Here they are. And a lot of these vases were actually vases for storage of olive oil. They're all over the place. So go away, dumb thingy. We want to see the vase, right? But for the most part, our museums today are full of these jars, mostly Greek, but Phoenicians did the same thing, which are illustrated with, and this is the first form of advertising. I would say this is the first form of advertising, because people are now having money, and they want to sell things, and when they want to sell things, you pack them nicely, so people are more eager to buy them. So one of the big things that they came up with in this time period, Iron Age, right, after the catastrophe of 1200, is money. Money. There are a lot of Greek legends, but anyways, how money came about, but that's another story. Another thing is a simple, modified way to write the alphabet. Phoenicians were the ones to do it, right? I have to write it again. Phoenicians here, people from Lebanon, they came with the alphabet, and they actually gave that idea to the Greeks. That's what it seems to have happened. Although there are people who dispute that, but anyways, that's another story. Not really important. Phoenicians, Lebanon over here, and you see the cities here: Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, where they make the Bible, or where they made the books. Anyways, that's what it's famous for, books. So, let's get back to our slides. Hebrews, children of Israel, come under this new form, city-states. But we also have this Assyrian Empire and Persian Empire. What is that? It means that some of these peoples in the Iron Age became so powerful that they spread quickly and created empires. So what is the difference between a state and an empire?
An empire is like more than one.
More than one state. So it's a state that contains many states. So therefore, United States would be an empire. In an ancient world, any state that consists of many states would be considered an empire. And in the ancient world, they believed in democratic or aristocratic rule on a small scale. So you have a city-state, well, that'd be like our Elizabeth, right? A small city, 100 and 150,000, that would be a really big city in the ancient world. And there you can still manage democracy. You know, people know each other, we can, get together. If we get together, there is a place, there is a space for us to meet, and all these practical concerns. But when you get to big empires, or multi-states, like the United States, there are certain problems. Like, you've heard the problems with the elections. How are we going to vote? Is it going to be in person, or is it going to be by mail? And
It's going to be rigged.
is it going to be rigged? Famously, Stalin used to say, it's not important who votes and how people vote. It's who counts the vote that matters. So, but we'll see. You never know these things. So, these are practical problems. We get more into this political stuff when we get to the Greeks, because this was their specialty. Because politics for the Greeks came from the word polis, which means the city. So politics is how do you run the affairs of the city. And here in particular, we have, for example, a very successful city-states. This is the northern part of Iraq. That particular area is called Assyria. We had Assyria over there. Their great city of Ashur, and Nineveh too. But anyways, Assyria very quickly, already in the 900s, created a great successful empire, just conquered the whole of the Middle East. This was followed by the Persian Empire. Persia is this area of Iran, Shiraz, that's Persia. On the border, near the border with mountainous area, on the border with Iraq. So that's Persia. Anyways, so this much as sort of a general introduction to the whole thing, because we're moving away from history far away and getting to the Greeks and Romans. But how a road to there leads through Ivana, right? Yes?
Yes, Ivana.
All right, good. All right. Wait a second, you're Louis, right?
Yeah.
I went to personal notes anyway. So, the Bible, Israel, that's a big part of our story. Well, we mentioned before that the story of the Bible for us, as we summarize it here, starts sort of with Abraham. Because he lived in the Bronze Age. People guess around 2000 BC, but nobody knows for sure. Abraham. What about before Abraham? What do we have before Abraham? Noah. Noah. The sons of Noah. The grandsons of Noah. The great-grandsons of Noah, blah, blah, blah. What's so special about Abraham? Why did we mention him?
He's like the leader of the Jews or something.
Well, that's kind of, he would be considered the first Jew, right?
Yeah.
If he was the first one to believe in the Jewish God, then he would be a first Jew. And God makes a covenant with Abraham and tells him, okay, if you go to Canaan, to Israel, right? Go away from Chaldea, Ur of the Chaldeans. And he goes and settles. Well, I told you there is a tomb of Abraham in Hebron. We're not sure that's exactly Abraham, but good enough for us. So you go there. I will give you this land to you and to your descendants, and and you'll be fruitful and multiply and have children more than children in a sense, descendants, right? More than the stars in the sky, and so on and so forth. So there, with Abraham begins the story of the Jewish people. We have Noah before. People often think, the first man was Adam, right? Adam and Eve. But actually, for all practical purposes, it was Noah. Because there is this story of Adam and Eve, but that's all destroyed with the flood, right? So we have Noah, and how many children of Noah? 3 children. Do you happen to know their names? Huh?
I don't know their names.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of interesting. And that would be Noah. Shem, Ham, Japheth. Today we interpret this in terms of language families. So ancient people always like to think, there was a person in the beginning. Who was in the beginning of the world? Adam. And then who was the first after flood? Noah. And who was the first Jew? Abraham. We don't think that way anymore. We think today, for example, in terms of Semitic languages. So that would be the language of Israel, Hebrew. The language of other people who lived in Canaan, Canaanites, right? Canaan and Canaanites. Canaan. Assyrians were also Semitic people. They spoke a language that was similar to Hebrew. Persians are not Semites. They spoke a language that is very different, and that's the language that we call Indo-European. Why? Because, I don't know, philologists, people who study languages, have figured out that the languages of India, the languages of Persia, the languages of Russia, the languages of Europe are connected. Connected, how connected? Like English and German. Do we understand German? Not really, but there are a lot of similarities. Like, I don't know, German has an article. You don't say house, you say the house or a house. Well, incidentally, in German it's, well, das Haus, like that, right? Das Haus. Is that different from the house?
Pronunciation-wise, similar.
So, and then, you know, when you get from England all the way to India, you don't understand anything anymore. Because, you know, England to Germany, and then Germany to Poland, And so anyways, but we use this ancient characters to indicate families. This would be an African family of languages. So Swahili would be a good example. Anyways, just an FYI. These things are sort of, you know, because we will often will come to these. But let's forget about Noah. Talk about Abraham, who had 2 children, right? Or at least that we, kind of 2 people, 2 children that we follow. Isaac and Ishmael.
Ishmael and Isaac?
Which one?
You said Ishmael, like both those names.
Yeah,
Those right.
Ishmael. So, Abraham, Isaac, then
Ishmael?
Jacob,
Oh.
his son, right? The way the Bible speaks. So Abraham begot Isaac, and Isaac begot Jacob. Jacob, aka Israel. It comes from a scene in the Bible where Jacob wrestles with the angel of God. So Israel means the one who fights with God, who wrestles with God. Anyways. And then Jacob had how many children? One, two, three, four. Right? 12.
12, but technically it wasn't 13.
Huh?
You said it was 12 or 13. He had one daughter.
Well, I'm not sure really.
I think, yeah, because they always said it 12, but then, because I remember the Bible.
I know when you start counting it.
Yeah, it was 13 or 12. Well, most likely it was 12.
But one that is important is Joseph, the youngest of all. Why is he important?
Was he like the favorite?
Is he what?
One of the favorites out of the 12?
Yeah, he was the baby boy. Joseph, sorry, Joseph. What happened to Joseph? He was sold by his brother into slavery,
Yeah, he was,
into Egypt, right? So he then moves from Israel, from Canaan, into Egypt. And then his brothers come with him when famine happens in Canaan. And they say, oops, we sold you. Could you take care of us now? Right? Heard that story? Are we still in the Bronze Age?
No.
Yes. Who will take us out of the Bronze Age? In other words, Joseph and the Israelites settle in Egypt, and then what happens? They live there for a couple of hundred of years. And who shows up? Do you see here? Moses. Moses takes them out of Egypt. To where?
To Israel?
Right, back where they came from, right? Is that strange? Maybe not. It puzzled me. Why did they have to go to Egypt? Because there was famine, right? As it says. But anyways, now they're going back to Israel, and the Bible says it's the land of milk and honey because, oh, wait a second, wasn't that their land that there was a famine in it? But anyways, things that we don't know. Well, I know that, people are reading it, at least, make me think. How is that possible? Anyways, Moses. Did Moses lead the Israelites all the way through? No?
Wasn't it that it wasn't the Israelites, but it was like their children? It took like a whole generation for them to get to Israel.
Yeah. So they crossed the Red Sea here, somewhere, who knows? This is the Sinai Desert. This is supposedly where Charleston Heston received the Ten Commandments. Right? Anyone knows who Charleston Heston was? Isn't he too old? Charleston Heston. Did you see the movie Moses? When you see the movie Moses, you'll see Charleston Heston. He used to be known as Mr. Moses, right? He died a couple of years ago. But, But interesting, from here they come actually, they don't go directly, they kind of come from this side, they cross the river Jordan. To me, at least, I say there is something a little bit suspicious about the account. Anyways, Moses watches the Israelites cross the river. This is the river Jordan. That as they come into the promised land under the leadership of Joshua, right? But he doesn't cross, he dies. Apparently God doesn't allow him to do that. There's something bad that he did earlier, and God said, no. You're not going. And what does Joshua do in Canaan? He'll the walls of Jericho. The walls of Jericho came tumbling down. What was that about?
Because of like war or the riot.
Huh? Because it was louder because
People went berserk or something, I think.
the what?
The people went like berserk, like they started like fighting against each other, I think, or arguing about something.
Yeah, it's a war. The Israelites are coming, and the people in Jericho are not welcoming them. Said, go where you came from. Why do you want to come here in our city? And they destroyed the walls of Jericho. This is what we call the catastrophe of 1200. This is when it happened. Israelites coming in to Canaan and destroying Canaanite cities like Jericho. Except the Bible kind of presents it in the way that the Bible presents things, you know. They blow the trumpets in front of the walls of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. Huh?
Like Gabriel, was blowing the trumpets?
Gabriel? Who Gabriel?
I guess the archangel, like archangel.
No, these are not angels. These are Joshua and his people. You know, they came from Egypt and they want to settle, and it turns out that there are people there. These Canaanites. They're called Canaanites. Sometimes some of them are called Philistines. I'm not sure if you have to have another A here, because Canaan is correctly spelled with double A, but I think with the Canaanites it drops. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Anyways, minor detail. There are a lot of stories about this messy period between, well, after 1200 BC. For example, the story of Samson and Delilah. Does that ring a bell? No? Samson and Delilah? Heard of it?
That's my daughter's name.
Why did you name her Delilah?
It sounded pretty to me. I didn't really know.
It sounds really pretty, it's
sounds
true.
like, yeah, like a flower.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know the story though.
Like, wasn't Samson like the guy who couldn't be like?
Well, that's
stopped?
why we're here.
And then like, I guess his weakness was Delilah. It caused his downfall.
Yes.
Like they found his weakness because.
So who is he? Samson.
Samson's like this strong man, like a strong.
Is he one of us or one of them? In other words, is he an Israelite or a Canaanite?
Canaanite?
No, he's an Israelite. Delilah?
Oh, she's a Canaanite. Okay. So then, like, I mean, I don't know the whole story, but I know that.
Tell me what you know. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So,
Because we're not really going over the story. We're trying to
Yeah.
summarize the whole thing.
So I guess like she turned. I think she gave away his weakness to the opposing enemy, to the Canaanites, and the Canaanites used that against Samson, and that killed him or something like that.
Yeah, where was his weakness?
Is his hair?
His hair. Samson had long hair, and that was the secret of his strength. And he falls in love with Delilah, and she, sweet talks him into telling her, where is your secret? And she tells her, it's the hair. And she cuts his hair off, and he loses his strength. Well, your daughter is going to find out that sooner or later. I'm sorry to bring the bad news here, but anyways, it's a beautiful name. It's one of the nicest stories in the Bible, I think. What happens next? I'll tell you. So he is humiliated now, and he's taken to the temple of the Canaanite god, right, Baal. And they mock him, and that's what usually, ancient people did in war. Because I told you several times that, these ancient gods are really tribal gods. So the Israelites have their own god. What's the name of the Israelite god? God of the Israelites. As the Jewish God has a name.
Yahweh.
You're not supposed to say that.
Oh no.
Right, that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And that's a little trick, I don't know.
Why is he not supposed to say that?
Well, the Orthodox Jews, well, this is how it's written in the Bible, right? It's actually in Hebrew, so yeah, like this, I think.
Oh man.
But like if you're Jewish and you go to your bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah and you read this, you're not passing. Because you're not supposed to pronounce God's name. You either say the name, Hashem, which means in Hebrew the name, but you don't say the name.
Oh.
Or you say the Lord, Adonai, my Lord, or our Lord.
If there's a test for bar mitzvah, you have to pass it.
Yeah, for bar mitzvah you're supposed to read the passage of the Bible.
So
In Hebrew. Not in English, in Hebrew. In the original, right.
At 13?
Yeah.
And everyone can go dress up and get ready, and then you don't pass, and then what, they don't celebrate?
But they don't let you take the ceremony until you're ready, right? I mean, of course, if you don't,
Okay.
yeah, a lot of people mumble, just.
I don't say that.
But you know, and we say, good enough. Wow, you read great, you know, read it, but anyways.
Oh, okay.
But you know, it's supposed to read it in Hebrew, right? And the Hebrew is written the other way around, right? So Yahweh, right? You know what I mean? We write from left to right, they write from, huh? So anyways, to get back to Samson, he asked God for the one last favor, to give him strength for a moment, and God gives him strength, and he destroys the columns of the temple, and the temple collapses, and everybody dies. It's a happy ending. Well, not exactly a happy ending, but it's a biblical story which has a moral message, so to speak, right?
Well, I don't really
And what's
know.
the moral message? Don't talk to women?
No,
No, it's
that's messed up. I would say like guard your.
What's the
heart.
moral message?
Like guard your heart. I mean that's what I take away from it. Like
What did you take for it?
Like sometimes you can't give away everything. Like you can't tell people everything.
Shut up, don't volunteer information?
Whoa. Yeah,
Something
you
along
let
those
your heart
lines?
get the best of you. You start doing things. You let your guard down pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, and I know like he fell in love with her, and that's okay. At the same time, like he also loved her so much that he forgot that she was on the other side. So then,
I think that's also a big part of the message. Don't sleep with foreign women. Right. And I don't know, you've been to Brooklyn and you've seen, I don't know, I've seen it many times. What happened when a Jewish child decides to marry a man or a woman who is not Jewish? It's,
like frowned upon.
well, depends from family to family, right? But a lot of families would be like, don't do it. I think Ivanka Trump had that issue. Just FYI, it just came to mind, I don't know. Because Kushner, her husband Kushner is from Brooklyn. And when they were about to get married, they were like, you know, she's not Jewish. Delilah, you know, huh?
They didn't care that she was the president.
No. Well, he wasn't the president, right, at that time. He was just Donald. Whatever, I don't know. But she's not Jewish, right? But then she decided to become Jewish and she converted and actually,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah. So anyway, just came to mind. But there are a lot of stories like that. It's not just, you know, it's not just Ivanka, right?
Yeah, it's like both men and women.
Right, right. And it's not just the Jews behave like that. Some people behave like that, I don't know. You're not going to marry a Catholic. What? Why? You know, people react like that. That's, But there is a special burden on the Jews because Jews are people of the covenant. Special covenant, right? And I don't know. Cool. Let's see what else do we have, so I don't forget to tell you a couple of things. Oh, okay, there were these Hittites. I don't know, we didn't talk about them, but Hittites were people who lived here in Turkey, in Anatolia. This is the kingdom of the Hittites. I don't know, just if you run into them in the book, so you know who they are. Otherwise, we don't have the time to talk more about them. And then we have this. Internal troubles with succession and the attacks of the sea people led to decline after 1200 BC. It's the catastrophe of 1200 in different parts of the world. In Egypt, in Mesopotamia, in the land of the Hittites, in Greece, and so on and so forth. The end of the Bronze Age. As my professor used to say. Anyways, Stonehenge, I have no, yes ma'am.
I see people, like, who do you?
Because they came from the sea.
Okay, but we don't know where they're from.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really came from, from the sea.
Yeah, I know, but.
They came from somewhere and they got into boats and just went around and apparently they figured out a way how to deal with the military of the Bronze Age. So they were very successful in destroying things. I don't know why they put Stonehenge in here. I have no clue. I think they're wrong and they should drop it as soon as possible.
Drop the stones?
Huh?
Drop the stones? Nah.
I think it's just famous and it's Bronze Age and therefore they put it in. But it has nothing to do with the stuff that we're talking about. So a couple of questions that we talked about. To what extent did the Israelites establish a unified state and what became of it? Okay, let's see what became of it. We came all the way to Joshua. After Joshua came people like Samson, who was one of the judges. The judges. So judges were Israelite tribal leaders. But then it says, but there was no king in Israel in the Bible. So it's a sign that there is going to be a king in Israel. In other words, the Israelites then start complaining. All the other nations, look at these Assyrians, look at these Egyptians, they have kings. Canaanites, they have kings. Why don't we have a king? Well, because God is our king. Well, but good, but we want a king, our king. Not just an Egyptian king. And so anyways, they pick up a king. Who's the first king of Israel?
David?
There is one before him. Good try. Saul. And after Saul came David. And then Goliath was gone. And then Solomon. So that's the kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of the Hebrews. And organizing, this is what we know. Israelites emerged as a distinctly group of people, possibly organized in tribes or a league of tribes between 1200 and 1000 BC and so on and so forth. And then they had a kingdom that should be coming then. Saul, David, Solomon. Right? But there is also one important element that pops up in the Bible with the kings, which is important for us today Today we call this the separation of church and state. But it's a principle that a religion and the state may or may not work together well. What I mean? Prophets. Prophets. Those people are prophets. Prophets are people who actually, what do prophets do?
You speak the word of God, deity.
Right. That's true. Those are people who speak in the name of God. What do they usually say, the Jewish prophet? Is there like a common message?
Follow the path, believe in our religion.
Or otherwise, what happens?
Die.
The punishment.
Basically, yeah, that's the message of the prophets.
But it's just
Follow the Lord. If you don't follow the Lord and you do other things, you'll get in trouble. Right. Simply speaking, that's the message. You know what the prophets by name?
Muhammad.
Huh?
Muhammad.
Muhammad is the prophet of Islam.
Oh, that's Islam.
Right, but
That's
I'm
one.
talking about the Jewish prophet. I mean, Muhammad follows in the same tradition. The first prophet would be Elijah, right? Elijah Rock. There's this anyways. There's this song, Elijah Rock. Okay. Elijah. And these prophets, they anoint. Well, they don't annoy, they anoint, which means they pour oil over the head of a king, like Saul. That's how you become a king. A prophet comes over and pours oil over your head. What's the point? What's the point? Huh? Yeah, Catholics do the same during the chrism, right? When they baptize the children and they chrism, they take the oil and a little. But like somehow in the Bible, I imagine it's like the whole jug of, olive oil. The point is that in the ancient world, people considered oil to really beautifies you. It's kind of like cosmetics. So you would, cover your head in oil. If you have hair, it shines better. If you don't have hair, then your skull shines better, right? So I think that might be the origin of the idea. But what prophet giveth, prophet can taketh away, right? So Saul was not a good king, and the kingship was taken away from him and given to David. And David was not good either. He sort of, I don't know, most famously he wanted a woman of his friend, and then he killed his friend and took the woman. But then he repented, and that's according to the tradition, right? He wrote what? The Psalms, right? The Psalms of David. So that's why Catholics who like repentance, they read a lot of Psalms. Psalms. It comes from the Greek. It's strange, but it's Greek. Psalm. That's why we have a PS, right? We call this. And it means to sing. So these are songs that David sung. And then after Solomon, the kingdom splits. into two parts. The kingdom of Israel, 10 northern tribes, and the kingdom of Judah, 2 southern tribes. Okay, but one of the tribes is Judah, where is the other one? It's Judah and Benjamin. And the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, has the capital of Jerusalem, and the northern kingdom is the capital of Samaria. Samaria. The northern kingdom then falls to the Assyrians. To the Assyrians. So far, so good. These are the things that we talked about, the spiritual dimensions. Monotheism. I'm the Lord your God. But the real question is, was Jewish monotheism something unique for the ancient world? Yes, for the purposes of the book. If the book asks you the question, yes. But really, the book always wants simple answer to complicated questions. It's not exactly was that different. In what sense? Well, people from Ashur, like Assyrians, well, they had their own god. It wasn't called Hashem, the name, but it was called Ashur. And it was their god. And they had a covenant with that god. Well, covenant meant an agreement, a contract. In other words, we promise to the God, we'll serve you, and the God promises, I will protect you, and I will make you victorious. How is that different from the Jewish God? The difference, I think, comes with the prophets. A Syrian king would not allow some sort of a busybody prophet to tell him what you did is wrong. Because there was a prophet that, he told King David, oh, King David, there is a story of a guy who killed his friend to get to his wife. And King David jumps and says, who is that bastard? And the prophet said, it's you, king. You did that. Now, that could work in the Jewish context, but not, for example, in the Assyrian context. The Assyrian king wouldn't allow these things to happen. And that's sort of this special character of the Jewish religion, that it has these sort of, often the word that we use is not just monotheism, but ethical monotheism. In other words, you do good, the good things will happen, you do bad, and God is going to punish you, even though He's your God, right? But He's going to punish you if you're not good. And that has to do with the law and that sort of thing. That's it. All right. So I'll open chapter 1 for you guys. It's going to be 1 and 2, a little bit of the 2, the stuff that we just covered. And that's about it. For now, we continue on Thursday.